my responsibility is basically the day-to-day operation of the community, making sure that things happen where they're supposed to be happen. I help pull the budget together, manage the budget, manage expenditures. When there's a need to talk to the state, you call Representative Kubiak. I'm the person who does that.
Okay. So within your experience with all of these other representatives and people in politics, what have you come to see as the most important issues that they face?
Well, there's a number of issues that all of which are larger issues but have a local impact that we're really not talking about. We're not talking about gun control. We're not talking about global warming. We're not talking about income inequality in this country, the availability of jobs, the hollowing out of the middle class. That all has an impact, not only on the nation, but it has an impact on the towns that we live in. And I think it's unfortunate that we don't hear a lot about that in terms of the campaign, that most of the campaign on both sides has been sound bites. And in the case of Governor Romney, or former Governor Romney, frankly, some outright lies. So, I much prefer that we have a substantive discussion about what it means to actively manage and what it means to put this economy back on track, rather than what we've seen. Massachusetts is fairly sheltered. I mean, we have one real significant contest, that being the senatorial contest. If you go to other states, not far, you just go to Ohio or go to Pennsylvania or go to some of the so-called battleground states. I was in Nevada a week ago, and it was impossible to watch the television with the sort of rabid, which is the way I'd characterize it, political advertising that was going on in that state. And that's a very hotly contested state. That's one of those battleground states.
All right.
That's great. Yeah, so just talking a lot about, you were saying that your position, you deal a lot with economical issues especially, and it's been brought up several times that the people believe that the most important issue in the current race for president is a lot about the economy and really how the president has been handling it, what both parties could do when they get into office to really reestablish the economy. So how do you think that the economy will be dealt with in the future, and what are the differences between both parties?
That's a big question, and if I could answer that effectively, sure. I would have a Nobel. It wouldn't just be Paul Krugman, I'd be sharing it with him. Mm-hmm. There are recessions and there are recessions. Most of the recessions that I've experienced in my life have been small ones, shallow ones, sort of V-shaped recessions where the economy tanks and it comes out again. And in fact, between 2001 and 2007, when the economy blew up for real, there was a small recession in 2001 that in the start of the Bush administration. It was very shallow, and we sort of bounced out of it. Most of the recessions are that way. This recession is very deep. It's very profound. It's probably the worst financial crisis the country's faced since the Great Depression, and it was caused in large part by a real shutdown of the financial markets. So it's going to take a long time. Economic experts have said it's going to take 5 to 7 years to come out of this recession. And I think, to his credit, I think the president, you just need to look at the closing year of the Bush administration. I mean, they abandoned their free market ideology and really began to apply some very strong Keynesian controls to try to terminate the recession, to try and end it. You had the auto bailout really had its part of its origin in the Bush administration. The whole stimulus program, the idea of a stimulus program, was really beginning to be pulled together by Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, who ironically is an expert on the Great Depression. What you saw was the president, much to his credit, taking on this issue of stimulus, taking on this issue of having the government take up the slack for the lack of spending on the part of businesses and consumers, and pushing the stimulus bill. Our elementary school, we spent $250,000 in in stimulus money on improving the energy efficiency of our elementary school. That put a lot of people to work. It's going to save the town, it's going to save the school system money going forward for the next 20 years. And we did that because of the action that President Obama took. I would have liked to have seen a stronger stimulus bill. I would have liked to have seen a broader spending categories. But we got what the president was able to get through Congress, and I think he's done a pretty reasonable job in managing this recession. I also think we're gonna be talking about this for the next 2 to 3 years.
Would you support further spending and a second stimulus, perhaps, if that were to come around?
It should have. I don't think, given the political climate, that people will be willing to do that, but I think that should have happened.
In that case, at a local level, what do you think is the best thing to do to stimulate the economy?
Well, there's not a lot that you can do at the local level. We have to be certain as a town, we have to be certain that our zoning bylaws are such that we allow for a reasonable amount of development, that people who apply for permits are granted the permits. If they deserve the permits, they're granted them quickly and effectively in a relatively short time period. I've seen lots and lots of towns where it takes, people come in and it takes months and months for zoning hearings and for permitting process. We really try to minimize the time. In 90 to 180 days to have a developer come in, have the permits they need and get started, given that that's a good development that we want to see. We have to keep our tax rate reasonable, and we depend a lot on you folks. We depend a lot on the value of our school system to help make the town be seen as a valuable place to locate. We depend a lot on the rec department. We depend a lot on our police department and our highway department. People want to live in a community that's well managed, that has good schools, and has good facilities and good opportunities and safe streets. So that's all part of the package that we can do and we are doing to try and encourage economic development locally.
What might you say to those who would advocate further tax breaks for companies to try to attract them to the region?
Well, contrary to popular belief, tax breaks aren't why companies locate. The old saw about location, location, location. What companies are looking for, and where Massachusetts has a disadvantage right now, is in our energy prices. Electricity is still pretty expensive, and we have, as we'll find out tomorrow when the nor'easter hits, it snows. So we've got some costs that we can't really control. What we do have is, again, good people. We have a highly skilled workforce. Greenfield Community College, very nearby, is a good source of folks with technical skills. We have the University of Massachusetts. Our flagship campus is only 12 miles away, and the resources located at UMass. So we have those public institutions who can really help boost us. We also have, as I said, a lot of interesting things. I talked to one local executive who was transferred out here from down south, and he was very pleased. He didn't think he'd be happy living in Deerfield, but he said, now I look around, there's places to go. It's very kid friendly. There's good schools. We feel safe at night. There's lots of entertainment in the area. So there's lots of different things that you can attract a company into. It's not to say you should never offer a tax break. You should come to the understanding that tax breaks aren't the primary reason that a company locates in a particular area. Having a good workforce and good support is very, very critical to located corporations.
All right. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I mean, just focusing a little bit more on the election, especially since it's gonna be divulged about that later tonight. Just talking about campaigns and the way they're being financed, and how do you feel that? What is your opinion, sort of, on campaign advertisement and the money that's being spent?
I was listening to Representative Kulig earlier, and there's really nothing I can add to what Steve had to say. I mean, I'm appalled at the amount of money that's getting spent,
Right.
and I'm appalled at the level of content or the lack of content in the advertising. I mean, if you, I would challenge anyone to come up with a good description of where any official stands in terms of their positions based on the advertising that we've seen. One thing that we didn't, we haven't talked about, we talked about a lot about national stuff. We have local election, which is very critical, and I think that the Brown Warren campaign is significant. I think the Democrats need very badly to maintain control of the Senate, and that's a critical phase. We also have 3 questions on the ballot that can have some implications for communities, and we need to think about those. Question 1, the right to repair, has pretty much been resolved, and Senator Rosenberg's been urging people to vote no on that question because there's been legislation that essentially manages that. But that's a great point in terms of how you want to be able to keep local businesses operating. And we have 4 or 5 companies in town that repair cars. And if they can't get the software, if they can't get the technical information they need to repair the vehicles, these cars are basically computerized now, they can't survive. So it's important for local business. That's a major question, a major impact on local business and local parts suppliers. So question 1 is, in having that resolved by the legislature in advance of the ballot vote was a good thing, but that's important. It also gets back to what the EPA did years ago when they said we're going to have a standard port that you can plug anything into to measure a car's emissions output. Well, that standard port became the interface for all the technology that gets built into cars now, and so having the software and the ability to read that is a critical piece for local repairs. You have the death with dignity question, which is a very, very personal question. It's going to be, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of debate. I've seen some yes and no signs as I drive up Sugarloaf Street. The ability for someone to control the time and manner of their death is a serious, serious question. And then there's the medical marijuana question. We're debating medical marijuana in Massachusetts at a time when Colorado, Oregon, and Washington are debating legalizing marijuana, and what does that mean? And you have blowback in California over legalized medical marijuana and the impact that's had on local communities. And what is it about the bill that we're going to vote on, we've been voting on today, that makes it different? Is the fact that the bill's written that there can be only 35 medical marijuana dispensaries in the state. Is that sufficient to maintain the kind of control you need? Has there been enough research even on marijuana to indicate that it has medical medical benefits to it? So these are very, very interesting questions. I know it's fun to talk about the presidency, but those are stuff that are much closer to home that can have an impact on us in a very short period of time.
All right. Well, Mr. Kubiak, thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
And we're going to break.